10. The Bucket List. When a 19-year-old woman in Florida got arrested in May of 2022, she told the deputy that it had been on her bucket list. According to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, Jania Douglas was caught speeding and driving recklessly in Key Largo, and when Sergeant Robert Dosh tried to pull her over, she refused to stop. She just kept driving until she came to a three-way intersection. That's when she finally gave up and let herself be arrested. Now, Jania wasn't aggressive or belligerent with the police. She got out of her car, went as peacefully as she could into the back of the police cruiser, and was taken to the police station. When they took her mugshot, she couldn't help but smile just a little, since she had finally crossed the item off her bucket list. She wanted to push the limits and see just how far she could get by eluding the police. And that was why she took them on a brief chase. In the end, Jania was charged with one felony count of fleeing and eluding and was locked up in jail. 9. Land speed terror. Jesse Combs died in a jet car accident while trying to push the limits of what a vehicle can do on land. Her death happened in 2017, the result of a catastrophic failure and blistering speeds on the salt flats of the Alvord Desert in southeast Oregon. Jesse was a professional racer, a skilled metal fabricator, and set the women's land speed class record on 4 wheels in 2013. Then beat that record in 2016. She was the fastest woman alive on 4 wheels, and it would be this love of speed and adrenaline that ultimately led to her demise. On August 27, 2017, she was trying to break her own land speed record yet again on the dry lake bed. A front wheel failed, almost certainly because it hit something in the desert, which caused the entire front wheel assembly to pretty much disintegrate. It collapsed after she was reaching 523 miles per hour, or 841 kilometers per hour. After the incident, a coroner ruled that she died from blunt force trauma to the head. She was likely dead even before her vehicle caught on fire and was engulfed in an inferno. Nonetheless, Jessie did beat her record, even though she died doing it. She beat the record by about 10 miles per hour, or 16 kilometers per hour, and was posthumously awarded the title of Female Land Speed World Record Holder in June of 2020. 8. Falling too hard in love. An English Premier League football star in England who has not been named pushed his infatuation with an adult escort to its very limits, and he's apparently on the brink of ruining his life. He was kicked out by his wife after he was caught shelling out over $55,000 on the escort, whom he had fallen in love with. According to sources close to the drama, the unnamed player spent over $35,000 in hourly fees over a period of 7 months. This was all just so he could be close to the woman he paid to hang out with him. He also spent over $20,000 on presents, things like jewelry and fancy stays at hotels. The player's wife grew suspicious for a few different reasons. First, he always came home smelling like perfume and flowers. Secondly, she discovered texts and pictures on his phone while he was in the shower. She confronted him. He admitted to becoming uncontrollably obsessed with the adult worker, and so she tossed him out. However, as not to ruin his reputation and career, she allowed him back in the house. But she reportedly made him turn location sharing on so that she can see where he is every second of every day. The wife now wants to walk away for good, but doesn't want to risk the shame and embarrassment of it all. And all because her husband took things too far with a paid escort. And since this was all revealed in June of 2022, it might not be long until we figure out who this guy really is. 7. Young and reckless. Recently, in summer 2022, a 14-year-old in Georgia was pushing the limits of just how fast he could go when he ended up driving his car straight into a house, resulting in 1 woman dead and 2 others seriously injured. It happened in Kawata County during a police chase. According to the authorities, deputies were patrolling Highway 54 when they identified a vehicle which failed to dim its headlights. The deputies tried to pull this vehicle over, but the driver sped off. This driver was later identified as the teenage boy. During the chase, he reached unimaginable speeds of over 130 miles an hour, or 209 kilometers per hour. He went so fast that the deputies lost sight of the car. The teenager may have gotten away from the cops for good if he would have just slowed down after losing them. But he kept pushing his luck, and that was when he lost control of the vehicle and drove straight into a house. A family of 3 had been sitting in their home peacefully, minding their own business, when the car smashed through their wall like a missile. The woman, identified as Annette Rush, 56 years old, died from internal bleeding and a heart attack. As for the teenager, he can't be identified at all because of his age. All we know is that he was taken to a youth detention center, and that he's most likely being charged with homicide by vehicle. 6. Science experiment gone wrong. A teacher was forced to resign in spring of 2022 after taking a science experiment way too far. The teacher taught at a middle school in Granbury, Texas. He was pushing the limits of science in the classroom when he accidentally set a student on fire. Well, the truth is that the school teacher set both the young student's hands on fire purposely as a part of the experiment. The student was among a group of volunteers who were eager to take part, and there was another classroom in the same building doing the same thing. The experiment only went wrong with the one student, and they were left with possible third-degree burns and permanent disfigurement. It all began when the class finished a test early and the teacher decided he would show them something that would blow their minds. He slathered the child's hands in hand sanitizer and then lit them on fire. The point of the experiment was to show how quickly alcohol burns, and that if the fire is snuffed out quickly enough, the student will experience no pain and won't be scorched. But things didn't go quite as planned. The hand sanitizer couldn't be extinguished, and the kid's hands were basically soaked in powerful alcohol that was burning his skin. He was severely burned and had to be taken to a children's hospital in Fort Worth, then transferred to a burn center in Dallas for additional treatment. And in the aftermath, the teacher who'd pushed his boundaries too far was let go. 5. The deadly Freefall drop tower. At Orlando's Icon Park, a teenager fell to his death. His name was Tyre Sampson, and he died on March 24, 2022, while visiting the theme park with his family and friends. The ride that took this boy's life is called the Freefall Drop Tower, and it's described by the park as the tallest freestanding drop tower in the world. It pushes the very limits of amusement park technology and thrill rides. It shoots passengers up into the air and then drops them 400 feet or 122 meters down at speeds that reach over 75 miles per hour or 121 kilometers per hour. Normally, people scream and shout. Sometimes they barf, and every now and then they pass out from the extreme thrill of it. But on this terrible day, Tyre fell out of his seat and hit the ground. The autopsy ruled his death as blunt force trauma, which resulted in multiple fractures and hemorrhaging to his head, as well as lacerations and hemorrhages to his neck and extremities. He hit the ground so hard his entire body nearly blew apart. While we don't know why Tyre fell out of the ride, there is a prevailing theory. The manual for the tower says that its maximum weight limit is 287 pounds, 130 kilograms. Tyre was 383 pounds, or 174 kilograms, at 14 years old, over the ride's limit by 100 pounds, or 45 kilograms. The ride has been closed ever since Tyre's death, making it look as though we may have finally found the extent of what humans can endure on amusement park rides. 4. Diving too deep. 2 men have drowned on a diving expedition in Florida. According to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office, a trio of teenagers witnessed the divers sink below the surface of Buford Springs Cave in June of 2022. This particular cave system, which is flooded, extends far below the surface of the earth and is a popular yet dangerous place to dive. These divers were pushing the limits of their capabilities by going too deep into the cave. Shortly after the teenagers witnessed the divers go in, one of them appeared at the surface, but was floating like a buoy, motionless and unresponsive. The teens were able to get the diver to the dock, but couldn't lift him out of the water. By the time the police showed up, he was quite obviously dead. But the second man was still missing. A crew of rescue divers had to descend into the black wetness of the cave, where they found the second man trapped 137 feet or 42 meters down. What makes this so shocking is that the teenagers had overheard the divers talking amongst themselves before making their descent. They had been arguing over whether they had enough air in their tanks to get to the bottom and come back. And since they both drowned, they obviously didn't have enough air. 3. The speeding nurse. A nurse with the National Health Service in the United Kingdom tried to speed through a traffic light at a blistering 64 miles per hour, or 103 kilometers per hour, and drove straight into somebody who had just been shopping for groceries. Her name is Rupa Kumar, and she pushed the limits of just how late you can be for a yellow light. She was in a zone of 30 miles per hour, or 48 kilometers per hour maximum, but was doing over double. She was supposed to be starting a night shift at a hospital in Birmingham, and knew she was late. There was no chance she would make it in time, and so she was speeding like a maniac down the quiet English streets. Sadly for the victim, he was directly in Rupa's way. The 42-year-old mom hurtled her Mercedes directly into Jiri Dort, a pedestrian minding his own business. Jiri has been described as a hard-working man who came to England to help support his family back in Czech. But after he got hit by Rupa's car in March of 2021, he hasn't been able to work. He spent 3 weeks in a coma because of the damage done to his brain. And then he couldn't go back to his job as a forklift driver. As a punishment for the brutal assault on Jiri with her vehicle, Rupa Kumar was locked up for 18 months. And while she'll be out in no time and back to her normal life, her victim is left with sleeping issues, constant pain in his whole body, a fear of crossing the street, and he can't even walk up the stairs by himself. 2. New York City subway surfer. In New York City, a young man pushed the limits of being a daredevil by climbing onto the northbound number 7 train. When the train arrived at the 111th Street station at about 6:30 p.m., the youngster was lying on the roof of it with blood oozing out of his head. He had been trying to surf the top of the train when he bashed his skull against something and fell down. And he was hardly alive when helpful citizens climbed onto the train to check on him. We don't know what he hit while riding the train, only that it did serious damage and resulted in his head bleeding profusely. He was still conscious, luckily, and was able to be helped down from the roof of the train and then rushed to Elmhurst Hospital. As of the end of June, just days after the incident, the young daredevil had already undergone 2 surgeries. His aunt, who didn't want to be named, told reporters that he was a good kid and was only doing what kids do, pushing the limits of safety. Unfortunately, it just didn't turn out the way he'd hoped, and now he could have brain damage for the rest of his life. Even more unbelievable is that his subway surfing accident was the second one in less than 2 weeks in New York City at the start of 2022 summer. 1. Speeding at the airport. In May of 2022, a man drove so fast that when he crashed his car, it went flying through the air and hit the control tower at the Yakima Air Terminal. The driver was seriously pushing the limit just before 3 o'clock in the morning on West Washington Avenue. Just as he was coming up to the curve near the airport doing insane speeds, he lost control of his vehicle. His vehicle hit a pair of transformers outside the airport, which sent his car spiraling airborne. And then he hit the side of the control tower like a boulder being flung from a medieval catapult. The driver and his passenger were taken to the Yakima Valley Memorial Hospital, but the driver was pronounced dead shortly after. Authorities estimated that he was driving at roughly 90 miles per hour, or 145 kilometers per hour. But it could have been even more than that. The crash disrupted all local flights and cut off power for nearly 12 hours.
Number 11. Walmart Brawl. Footage of a disturbing fight between 2 Walmart customers in Colorado Springs went viral in 2020, leaving viewers curious about how the brawl got started in the first place. While the exact circumstances leading up to the first punch are unclear, it appears as though a woman who was waiting in line told the woman behind her to respect social distancing guidelines and give her some space. Soon enough, the woman in front began throwing the customer's items off the conveyor belt, and a fist fight ensued. For several minutes, the women pulled each other's hair and took swings at one another. A worker tried to separate them and at one point asked one of the women if they wanted to go to jail. Witnesses found it interesting that the woman who initially complained about social distancing and was later identified as 60-year-old Laura Barr wasn't even wearing a mask, even though the store required it. Police charged her with third-degree assault for her role in the fight. In another shocking Walmart fight that was captured on video back in 2015, a 6-year-old boy took it upon himself to get involved in a squabble between his mom and another shopper in Indiana. The boy's mother had gotten into some sort of altercation with a woman on a motorized cart in the store's shampoo aisle and was holding her opponent down on the floor when the youngster decided to kick the victim in the head. In a shocking example of how children learn from example, he told the woman lying on the floor that she couldn't tell him to stop. Understanding that he was a kid who didn't know any better, she compassionately replied, "No, you're right, baby. Protect your mom." Throughout the fight, bystanders can be heard telling the women to stop and that there are children nearby witnessing the incident, but no adults even tried to intervene. Viewers were equally put off by the childish spat, with one commentator describing it as white trash at its finest. Number 10. Frenzied teenagers. Christmas shoppers were horrified on December 13, 2020, when a man was knifed to death outside the Harrow Town Center following a dispute on Snapchat. Two 19-year-olds, Ricardo Williams and Johnny Menzies Samuels, fatally stabbed Hussein al-Sabri in front of shocked shoppers inside the doorway of a Tesco Express, and he collapsed and died right there on the scene. The 23-year-old man was stabbed in the stomach with a Rambo knife, while two friends he had been shopping with narrowly escaped with their lives after they too were slashed by the attackers. Both the teenagers were arrested and then convicted by a jury and sentenced to more than 50 years in prison. During the court proceedings, it was revealed in the months prior to the attack that Ricardo Williams had been belittled on a Snapchat video by a group of youths calling him names. This led to a revenge plan, which accumulated in the knifing on December 13th. It was all just revenge over a silly video carried out on one of the busiest shopping streets in town. The teenagers had absolutely no chance of not getting caught perpetrating such a brutal attack in front of so many people, and yet they did it anyway. Number 9. Cocaine bananas. Police in the European country of Czech seized 1,852 pounds of cocaine. The cocaine was hidden inside boxes of bananas that got shipped to several supermarkets in the country. Grocery store workers were shocked when they opened up the boxes to unload the bananas for eager shoppers, only to discover massive bricks of cocaine wrapped in some kind of green cellophane. These were molded cocaine cubes, the kind you see in the movies, just sitting there in cardboard boxes of bananas. What's really crazy is that this wasn't an isolated incident. Cocaine bananas were shipped to supermarkets in Prague and other small towns. What the police know right now is that the drugs arrived in Europe at a port in Hamburg, Germany in 2022. Then they were delivered to the supermarkets on the other side of Europe. Police believe they were supposed to be intercepted by smugglers, but the smugglers made a mistake and missed the transports, and the cocaine actually ended up in the grocery stores. To give you an idea of how much this stuff was worth, it could have gone for over $86 million on the local market. As of yet, no arrests have been made, and the cops aren't exactly sure which criminal organization was behind the shipment. Number 8. Shopping cart thieves. In the city of Akron, Ohio, a brave worker at the Dollar General tried to stop two women stealing a pair of shopping carts full of items. Each woman walked into the store, filled their respective shopping cart up with cheap dollar store goods, and then made a brazen getaway. The worker tried to stop them, but the women fought back and beat them up. The worker was kicked in the head several times, and then ran over by a shopping cart full of cheap stuff. The incident happened just after 9 o'clock in the morning in February of 2022. The victim hasn't been named for privacy reasons, but was identified as being 46 years old. We also know the individual was the manager and suffered a major beatdown at the hands of the thieves. Not only did they kick him and run him over, but they also scratched and spit at him. To make things even more unbelievable, the thieves got away with their loot. 2 full shopping carts, a brutal assault, and the women just ran off into the morning, never to be seen again. Number 7. Babies in the car. A mother in California was arrested back in the summer of 2018 for leaving her babies in a Walmart parking lot. Her name is Crystal Reyna Gonzalez, 34 years old at the time of her arrest. Police allege that she left 2 infants, just tiny little babies, in a blazing hot car for over 30 minutes. There was no air conditioning. Temperatures soared to almost 100 degrees outside, and so it was even hotter inside the stuffy vehicle. The mother left the kids while she roamed around Walmart in the air conditioning, doing some leisurely shopping in Ontario, California. Luckily, Good Samaritans noticed the children in the vehicle while they were walking through the parking lot and called the police. One of the children was just around 1 year old, and the other was only 9 months. They were locked inside the white GMC, and the concerned citizens in the parking lot couldn't get the doors open to rescue the children. Somebody started recording. A massive crowd formed around the car, and that was around the time the police showed up. The person recording went on filming the vehicle for 11 minutes before Crystal finally strolled up to her car like nothing had ever happened. She opened the vehicle, the police removed the children, and she was immediately arrested on suspicion of child endangerment. Number 6. Savior in the grocery store. A man in Texas has been labeled a hero after he saved a woman's life while shopping at a grocery store in 2020. His name is Justin Thomas, and he had gone to the grocery store never imagining he would end up somebody's savior. He ran into his local Kroger in League City and walked straight into a life or death situation. According to NBC News, the father of 4, someone who also happens to be certified in CPR and a practicing electrician, was buying some milk when he heard a blood-curdling scream from a few aisles over. He ran in that direction, and that was when he saw an old lady lying on the floor, as if she had just gotten shot. Thomas knew immediately that the woman was having a heart attack. He had served for 10 years with the United States Coast Guard and knew exactly what to do. While everyone else was just crowding the woman, who had nearly dropped dead while trying to do some shopping, Thomas lurched into action. He gave her CPR and chest compressions and kept her alive until paramedics came. Following the dramatic episode at the grocery store, Justin received a message from the woman's family confirming that she had survived, and it was all because of him. Doctors said that if it hadn't been for Justin's quick actions, that woman would have died on the floor of the Kroger's. Number 5. Shopping Mall Rampage. Raphael Chevello went on a rampage at a Manchester shopping mall in the UK, assaulting 5 individuals with a knife. He wounded 3, attempted to wound 2 more, and all for apparently no reason other than that he was insane. The terrifying shopping mall rampage took place on October 11, 2019. Raphael was a known cannabis user, and he suffered from schizophrenia. He was admitted to a hospital back in 2006 for his psychiatric illness, which he had suffered pretty much his whole life. A forensic psychiatrist said that it was highly unlikely that Raphael would ever commit a violent offense, unless of course he was having a schizophrenic attack. It also came out during the trial that medical personnel and Raphael's family members were aware of his deteriorating mental state. He was in a downward spiral, which landed him at the Arndale Mall that day. The attack was traumatizing for everyone present. He caused widespread fear and panic. One of the victims was a woman in her 30s walking with her husband. Raphael smiled at her just before he lashed out with a knife. He then attacked a woman in her 40s pushing a baby in a stroller, who only narrowly escaped death because the knife skidded across her ribs. His victims included a 21-year-old woman from Ireland, an engineer in her 60s, and a 52-year-old woman who worked at a department store. The attack lasted approximately 1 minute and 27 seconds, and it was clearly targeted at women. In the end, Raphael was sentenced to a hospital order by the Manchester Crown Court. This means that because of his unstable mental state, he's going to be locked in a hospital for the foreseeable future, but probably not forever. Number 4. Security guard attack. A local transient got into an argument with a security guard at a Riverside shopping center in California and almost beat the man to death. It happened on a Thursday night in April of 2022 in the parking lot of the shopping center. The security guard's job was to be outside and protect the property, to protect the customers, and to ask anyone with no business at the shopping center to please leave. And that was exactly what he was doing when he got attacked. The Riverside Police Department have identified the attacker as Emmanuel Aram, a vagrant who hangs around in the area. When the security guard asked Emmanuel to leave the property, the transient snapped at him and unleashed a vicious assault. The security guard will live, but he's undoubtedly traumatized and shaken, and will probably be for the rest of his life. To make matters worse, the police were well aware of Emmanuel and how dangerous he is to society, but they let him roam free. He has a long criminal history and has been repeatedly arrested, especially in the last 6 years. His crimes involve all kinds of things, including assaulting police officers. The attack wasn't even a big surprise to local residents. Jack Lagova, who lives in the area, told Eyewitness News that he doesn't like his female relatives using the laundromat at the mall alone, regardless of day or night, because the whole area has become so unpredictable. Number 3. The Russian shopping mall fire. In March of 2018, a fire broke out at a shopping mall in the Siberian city of Kemerovo. The unquenchable blaze tore through the mall, trapping shoppers in a dense smog of toxic smoke. It killed at least 64 people, 41 of them young children. A class of school kids had been inside the center when it burst into flames, and every single one of them got trapped in the burning mall. It happened early on a Sunday morning at the Winter Cherry Shopping Mall. Because it was the first weekend of the spring holiday season, the place was bursting with families and kids. Most of these families had gathered in the play area near the movie theater. When the fire broke out, the fire exits had been locked, and the alarm system had been switched off, and so nobody had anywhere to go. These people were literally stuck inside the mall, and some of the school kids actually posted to social media in the moments before they were engulfed in flames. One student from the 5th grade, named Maria Moros, posted, "We're burning, it's probably goodbye." She and her entire class would be dead just minutes later. In the aftermath, nothing really happened. There were memorials and tributes, but the tragedy was mostly swept under the rug. The official number is 64 dead, although others claim it's actually in the hundreds. The mall was already unsafe, considering it had been converted from a communist confectionery factory into a shopping center, a variable death trap with few windows and almost no exits. Nobody knows what started the fire, or at least nobody who knows has made the information public. Number 2. Washington underwear thieves. 2 teenagers were arrested in June 2022 for a brazen midday shoplifting spree in which they stole underwear and then pulled a weapon on a security guard. It happened at a South Hill Mall in Puyallup, Washington. According to what Captain Ryan Portman told the Tacoma News Tribune, the thieves began stealing underwear at about 5 o'clock in the evening. When they were busted, one of the suspects pulled out a gun, jammed it in the security guard's face, and then they made a break for it. The suspect with the gun was only 16 years old and had already resorted to a life of underwear banditry. But these underwear bandits didn't get too far, as they were captured by an unmarked police car who found the duo making their escape. Both the teens were arrested and booked into the local jail, and their loaded gun was taken away from them. We don't know how much underwear they got away with, or if they threatened any other shoppers with their loaded weapon. Number 1. Austin robbery spree. In Austin, Texas, 4 suspects went on an almost unbelievable crime spree. In June of 2022, these 4 thieves pulled off a string of 9 armed robberies before their final victim struck back. The robberies took place over about a week, with all the perpetrators being under the age of 19. They started on June 10th in downtown Austin and spread all the way to the north of the city. Their main target was busy business areas outside local shopping centers and strip malls. One of the suspects would walk from the vehicle into the busy area outside the mall, point a handgun, demand someone's stuff, and then pistol whip the victim before running back to the car. These victims were just trying to do some shopping, only to walk outside and be robbed at gunpoint. But it all came to a dramatic end on June 14th. The suspects pulled their vehicle up outside a shopping mall and picked out their targets, a male and a female who were walking into the mall. The man had a backpack on, and so the thieves thought he might have some good stuff in it. One of the robbers pointed his handgun at the female, and that was when the man pulled out his own gun and did not hesitate to start shooting. He shot multiple times at the robber, but only managed to hit him in the leg. The robber then gave up and ran away, and the suspects fled, but they were quickly apprehended by the police, who later identified 2 of them as having already been arrested as juveniles in 2021 for a completely different string of robberies. Number 9. Redonda Vaught. Redonda Vaught was working as a nurse at a highly respected hospital in Tennessee in 2017 when she accidentally killed a 75-year-old patient by giving them the wrong medication. She withdrew what she believed was a sedative from an electronic medication cabinet, not realizing that it was actually a paralyzing agent. By the time Vaught's mistake was discovered, she had already given it to the patient, who stopped breathing and was left brain dead. Vaught took responsibility for the mistake in a Tennessee Board of Nursing hearing and said that she was distracted by a trainee while retrieving the medication. She also admitted to becoming complacent at her job and expressed deep remorse, stating that she thinks every day about how her actions caused someone to die. The former nurse was convicted on felony counts of criminally negligent homicide and gross neglect of an impaired adult. She'll never work in the healthcare field again, but her record will be expunged if she stays out of trouble during her 3-year probation sentence. The case was highly controversial as nurses rallied around Vaught, citing her case as a disturbing precedent for the future criminalization of medical mistakes. On the other hand, the widow of the woman she accidentally killed had been hoping for the maximum punishment, which Vaught did not receive. But Vaught believes the loss of her career and the ways the incident have forever changed her are punishment enough, and many agree. After all, she has to spend the rest of her life knowing that she took someone's life in a moment of carelessness. Number 8. Christopher Gordon and Angelica James. Christopher Gordon already had 2 domestic violence convictions under his belt when he was charged with felony domestic assault in Louisville, Kentucky in 2020. He had allegedly attacked his girlfriend, Angelica James, for talking to the mechanic who was working on her car. Despite his established record, the district attorney opted not to prosecute the case and allowed Gordon to plead down to a misdemeanor-level charge. It was his 3rd domestic violence conviction in less than 3 years, yet he walked away with just 2 years of probation and a stern warning to stay away from his victim. Earlier this year, police arrested Gordon on suspicion of shooting Miss James dead in front of her 2 children. To many, the murder was entirely preventable, if only those in a position of power to intervene more heavily had chosen to do so. They had all the information they needed to know that Gordon was a serial abuser, and that this pattern pointed towards the potential for even worse offenses in the future. But instead of taking a heavy-handed approach, some might say the prosecutors treated the case as an inconsequential backwater and not taken it seriously enough. Domestic violence activists and experts have pointed out that all the signs were there, and that it's hardly surprising that when left to his devices, Gordon escalated his abuse to a deadly level. He is currently facing a murder charge in connection with the fatal shooting. While it's unfortunate that someone had to pay with their lives for the justice system to pay the kind of attention to the case that it is now, Gordon probably won't be back on the streets anytime soon if he's convicted. Number 7. Jennifer and James Crumbley. It's not incredibly common for parents to be criminally charged over their children's wrongdoings, even if they're minors. But when a young man named Ethan Crumbley shot 4 people dead at a high school in Pontiac, Michigan, detectives found that his parents had ignored crucial warnings that could have possibly prevented the massacre. In the days leading up to the incident, one teacher contacted Jennifer and James Crumbley after they caught their son searching for ammunition online, and another teacher reached out to the couple after finding a violent drawing that he had made. Instead of trying to get to the bottom of the teen's obvious issues, Jennifer failed to respond to the teachers and even joked with him about how he needed to learn how to not get caught shopping for ammo at school. The Crumbleys had opposed having their son transferred out of the school, and they also failed to disclose that he not only had access to a deadly weapon, but they had bought it for him as a gift. Authorities later revealed that the gun was kept in an unlocked drawer, and that both Jennifer and her son had bragged about it on social media after buying it. Considering the degree to which Jennifer and James failed to heed the obvious warning signs that their son was capable of committing a horrific act of violence, prosecutors charged them each with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The case is ongoing. Number 6. India Cummings. One day in 2016, police responded to a call about a mental health emergency in the small city of Lackawanna, just outside Buffalo, New York. While they were there, 27-year-old India Cummings carjacked a vehicle and got into a police chase. Officers eventually caught up to her and took her into custody, later noting that she was acting erratic. They took India to a holding center, where she continued to act strangely for the next 17 days. Logbook entries described how the troubled young woman smeared food in her cell, was often naked, and threw trash around, among other strange behaviors. It was clear that India's mental health was suffering, and it soon became evident that she was also in physical danger. She stopped eating and drinking, seemed increasingly confused and detached from reality, had poor hygiene, and bore signs of an arm injury and possible kidney failure. India was put on 24/7 watch as she languished in her cell without proper medical care. At one point, she told a deputy that she was dying, but no urgent action was taken. A mental health expert was finally called in to evaluate the woman and concluded that she needed to be hospitalized. But it didn't happen, and the next day, India was found unconscious in her cell. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and died from a combination of ailments, including cardiac arrest, severe dehydration, malnutrition, and organ failure. India also had a broken arm, which happened during her arrest, according to a state medical review board. No criminal charges were ever brought against staff members for failing to act when it was clear that India needed help, despite the review board's conclusion that the treatment India received was so grossly incompetent and inadequate as to shock the conscience. This preventable and tragic case is just one example of the thin line that exists between the realm of not noticing something as it's happening and turning a blind eye to it. There are still many unanswered questions surrounding India's death, which added to years-long suspicions that inmates at that particular holding center are often ignored and left to agonize as their health and mental condition deteriorate. Number 5. Megan Severson. Megan Cheryl Severson was driving along US Route 52 one day in late 2019 when she crashed into the back of a Saturn at 59 miles per hour, 95 kilometers per hour. She had just switched lanes and failed to notice that the traffic in front of her was stopped until a half second before the collision. The accident involved 4 vehicles and multiple people were injured. A 33-year-old man named Anthony Kelly Cowino tragically died when he was ejected from the Saturn that Severson hit. The young woman told the police that by the time she realized traffic wasn't moving, she was unable to avoid the crash. She claimed that she wasn't eating, drinking, or using the phone at that time. But something seems to have pulled her attention away from the road in front of her, based on surveillance footage that shows Severson taking no evasive action, according to a law enforcement analysis. The investigation found that Severson wasn't using her phone, leaving distraction as the only possible explanation, absent of hitting the cars on purpose. She pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide earlier this year and offered a tearful apology to Cowino's family in court. The surviving relatives were involved in negotiating a plea agreement that Severson worked out with prosecutors that will involve 123 days of jail time, a 5-year state sentence, and 5 years of probation. Honoring a request from Cowino's loved ones, the judge ordered Severson to serve her first 90 days in jail this year and to report to jail every year on the anniversary of the man's death until 2026 to serve out a portion of her remaining time. She's also required to speak about the tragedy at a driver's education class. Both the judge and the prosecutor acknowledged that what happened was a terrible accident, but they both intend on having the case serve as a cautionary tale that will warn others against the consequences of distracted driving. Number 4. Remote tuberculosis outbreak. Jennifer McNabb was the only public health nurse working in the remote village of Pangniturk in Nunavut, Canada last year, when she found herself dealing with a tuberculosis outbreak. The infectious disease was spreading too fast for her to track and treat everyone on her own, so she began contacting her superiors and letting them know that they urgently need to send more healthcare workers to the community. Located just below the Arctic Circle, Pangnirtung is an isolated settlement that can only be reached by plane. In order to get residents the treatment they needed, McNabb was relying on the government to follow through. But her pleas for help went overlooked, as health officials hesitated to acknowledge the issue, according to the Globe and Mail. It wasn't until 2 months after the illness began to spread that they declared an outbreak and allocated resources to contain it. Tuberculosis is curable, and many people view it as a disease of the past. But it's still a major problem among Indigenous communities in parts of Canada, where tuberculosis rates are exponentially higher than they are elsewhere throughout the country. This is partially due to economic and health disparities that make Native communities more vulnerable to its spread. A Globe and Mail report by journalist Kelly Grant found overwhelming evidence indicating that if the Nunavut government had responded more quickly to McNabb's requests, the infection rates would most likely have been much lower. Instead, they left her to deal with it on her own, and it proved impossible as tuberculosis spread like wildfire among the population of around 1,500 residents. The failure to take prompt action runs contrary to the federal government's bold promise to eradicate the disease by 2030. Accomplishing this goal will be incredibly difficult if the response times to requests for assistance continue in this manner, which results partially from chronic staffing shortages that seem to have no end in sight. Number 3. Joshua McLemore. Police in Seymour, Indiana responded to a concerned call about the well-being of a man named Joshua McLemore and found him naked and incoherent. They eventually convinced him to voluntarily go to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, but he allegedly pulled a nurse's hair and was sent to the Jackson County Jail before he received adequate treatment. McLemore had a history of methamphetamine abuse and had been in the emergency rooms numerous times for the consequences of it. The doctor he saw before going to jail had treated him on previous occasions and was familiar with how he acted when he was high. She told Indiana State Police that McLemore's increasingly erratic behavior, unfocused state, and rambling speech were inconsistent with his typical symptoms. He bit a chunk of paint off the squad car as he was being put inside and cracked the windshield with his feet. Once he arrived at the jail, he was immediately put in a padded cell where all of his activities were captured on surveillance footage. Employees tasked with watching the cameras switched duties every 4 hours without communicating much to one another about what happened before or after their shift, leaving them tragically unaware that McLemore was barely eating or drinking. During a stay, he barely spoke, only showered twice, and his cell was routinely covered in spilled food, drinks, and urine. 18 days after arriving at the jail, McLemore was taken to the hospital in critical condition. He was lethargic and had lost 45 pounds and died from organ failure just 2 days later. An official investigation concluded that jail staff had been negligent and that McLemore likely died from a prolonged lack of attention from jail staff. But the evidence came up short of constituting a crime, and no charges were filed. Number 2. Texting and walking. A 67-year-old New Jersey woman's ordinary day took a disastrous, unexpected turn one day in 2017 when she got distracted with her phone during a walk in Plainfield and failed to watch where she was going. The senior citizen was passing by a business and looking down at her screen when she tripped and fell into an open sidewalk access door. She fell 6 feet and was seriously injured as a curious crowd of onlookers gathered around. Firefighters rescued the woman from the hole and rushed her to the emergency room. Surveillance footage of the incident suggests that she was walking and texting right before the accident, and that a distraction put her in harm's way. Workers had the access door open because they were repairing gas lines in the area that day, and the elderly pedestrian might have noticed this if she had been paying more attention to her surroundings. With the way technology has taken over our lives, it's normal to see people staring at their screens, seemingly oblivious to the world around them. But cautionary tales like this serve as a sobering reminder of the very real danger that someone can put themselves in by getting absorbed into their phones while multitasking. Number 1. Lauren K. Scott. After being intimate during the early morning hours one day in 2017 with her then boyfriend Robert Anderson Jr., 23-year-old adult film actress Lauren K. Scott apparently started paying too much attention to her phone for her man's liking. He got upset and asked her to leave his home in Pinellas Park, Florida. Instead of complying, Scott allegedly got angry and punched Anderson in the face, leaving him with a cut and swollen lip. Police arrested the young woman on suspicion of misdemeanor domestic battery and booked her into the county jail. As it turned out, Scott was actually married at the time. She sorted out her legal issues in Florida and then returned to Los Angeles, where she had been living with her husband before she got arrested. Sadly, the troubled actress's life continued along the wrong path, and she passed away last year from a drug overdose after battling addiction for years. Scott had reportedly been to rehab several times and was doing her best to get sober when she lost her battle against her demons. Thanks for watching. Would you rather trip and break your ankle while walking and texting, or lose your driver's license for 6 months? Let me know in the comments below.